Morphology, words and pieces of words group 3.
So, this is the definition of morphology. Morphology is a branch of linguistics that identifies the basic units of language as grammatical units. Morphology also studies the intricacies of word forms and the effects of change in word forms, both grammatical and semantical function. Etymologically, the word morphology comes from the word morph, which means from the word logic, which means sense. So literally, morphology means the sense of form. In the study of linguistics, morphology means the branch of linguistics that deals with the intricacies of word forms and their change and the impact of change on the meaning and class of words. So, according to Rahma, the notion of morphology is part of linguistics which studies the ins and outs of word form and change in the word form to the meaning and group of words.
Okay, and for the next material, we will discuss about morpheme. And it will be presented by me, Dimas Prasetyo. A morpheme is the smallest unit that has a meaning. It cannot be divided into smaller parts. For example, unreadable. In unreadable, there are 3 morphemes: un, read, and able. According to Sandel, morpheme is the smallest meaningful unit of language and divided into 2, namely free morphemes and bound morphemes. Thus, every meaningful part of word that has sense belongs to morpheme. Okay, for the next slide is a tree diagram of morpheme. Maybe for more specific, what is free morpheme, what is bound morpheme, we can discuss in next slide. Okay. For the next material is classification of morphemes. There are some types of morpheme, such as free and bound morphemes. Okay. For the first types of morpheme is free morpheme. Free morpheme is a morpheme that can stand alone, or a free morpheme is a grammatical unit that can occur by itself. All of the words have individual meanings, and all of them are free morphemes. Free morphemes can be categorized into 2 subtypes. There are lexical morphemes and grammatical morphemes. The lexical morphemes are those morphemes that are large in number and independently meaningful. The lexical morphemes include nouns, adjectives, and verbs. And this type of morpheme are called lexical morpheme. For example, dog, good, honest, boy, girl, woman, excellent, etc. Okay. For the next subtypes of free morpheme is grammatical or functional morphemes. The grammatical or functional morphemes are those morphemes that consist of functional words in a language, such as preposition, conjunction, determiners, and pronouns. For example, and, but, or, above, on, into, after that, and etc. Okay. For the next material is bound morphemes. A bound morpheme is a morpheme that cannot stand alone as independent word. Or in other words, a bound morpheme is a grammatical unit that never occurs by itself, but it's always attached to some other morphemes. Bound morphemes consist of derivational and inflectional morphemes, and also affixes. Okay, we are going to subtypes of bound morphemes. The first is inflectional morphemes. An inflectional morphemes is a morpheme that can only be a suffix. An inflectional morphemes creates a change in the function in the word, but inflectional morphemes do not create new meaning. According to Yule, English has only 8 inflectional morphemes. For example, 2 used for adjective, 2 used with nouns, and 4 used with verbs. Jadi ada 8 dalam bahasa Inggris yang termasuk dalam inflectional morphemes. 2 untuk kata sifat, yaitu comparative and superlative. 2 untuk kata benda sebagai bentuk plural dan bentuk posesif. Dan 4 dalam kata kerja sebagai orang ketiga, past tense, past participle, dan present progressive. Okay, and for the next material is the second subtypes of bound morpheme. There is derivational morphemes. Derivational morphemes are also known as the opposite of inflectional morphemes. Jadi ini kebalikannya dari inflectional morphemes. A derivational morphemes is a morpheme that can be added to a word to create or drive another word. This type change the meaning of the word or the part of speech, or both. For example, akhiran Asian, awalan un, akhiran al, akhiran aus, dan akhiran y, and etc. For example is in rationalization. In rationalization, there are 5 morphemes, and the final morpheme is akhiran s. Jadi di akhiran tuh rationalizations dengan akhiran s, dan s-nya itu mengganti makna dari rationalization itu sendiri. Jadi bedanya kalau yang inflectional itu tidak mengubah makna, tapi kalau yang derivational ini mengubah makna. Okay, and for the last subtypes of bound morpheme is closing morpheme and non-closing morpheme. A morpheme such ice, akhiran ice in the word formalize and legalize is not a closing morpheme because we can add other words after it. For example, formalizer and legalization. Akhiran r and in those words are not closing morphemes.
So, I want to talk about affixes. Affixes are those bound morphemes that naturally attach different types of word and use it to change the meaning or function of those word. For example, man for enjoyment, entertainment, and in enlighten, enhance, enlarge, as in Joseph's, Laura's, in reading, sleeping, singing, etc. Affixes can be categorized into 5 subclasses according to their positions in the word and function in a phrase or sentence. They are prefixes, infixes, and suffixes.
Affixes have 3 components. The first is prefixes. Prefixes are kind bound morphemes included at the beginning of different types of words. For example, un, sub, incomplete, injustice, unable, etc. Number 2 is infixes. Infixes are those bound morphemes included within the words. There are no infixes that exist in the English language, but the last but not least is suffixes. Suffixes are those bound morphemes included at the end of different types of words. For example, able, less, careless, available, etc. And we have a root morpheme. A root morpheme is the primary lexical unit of a word and cannot be reduced into smaller constituents. The term of root is generally synonymous with free morphemes. But the roots may sometimes be bound morpheme. Example, run is the root of running. Dog is the root of dogs. We have stem morpheme. A stem is a part of a word. The term is used with slightly different meanings. Stem and root have more or less the same meaning. So the root or stem of unreadable is read. There are 2 morphemes, break and water. Another example, the stem of the verb wait is wait. They have 2 variants. Variant 1 is wait infinitive and wait imperative. Waiting progressive. Look, base-nya reaction, stem-nya reaction with S, root-nya react, ion with S. The stem is the base with all inflectional suffixes removed, whereas the root is what remains after all affixes have been taken off. B. Nuclear and peripheral structure. A non-root and is always outside of the nuclear. Example, the word formal the nuclear element or nuclear structure is form and the peripheral element is all. In the word formalis the nuclear structure is formal. Nah, the nuclear structure ini peripheral morphemes itu sama formalisnya dengan nuclear structure.
On this slide, I'm gonna present about a morph. The definition of morph, its types, and the difference between morph and morpheme. What is morph? In linguistics, a morph is a word segment that represents one morpheme, or the smallest unit of language that has meaning in sound or writing. It's a written or pronounced portion of a word such as an affix, a prefix or suffix. For example, the word infamous is made up of 3 morphs, in, fam, and us, each of which represents one morpheme. The word has 2 affixes, both a prefix in and a suffix us, attached to a root word. A type of morph. A morph that can stand alone as a saying is called morph-free. For example, big adjectives, street verbs, and residence words are Fitri. Roots may or may not be free morph. For example, the root of the word building is the structure, the meaning of building. It also contains the prefix of con and n, or the latter meaning that the word was a name. And then, what is the difference between morph and morpheme? Morphology focuses on the various morphemes that make up a word. A morpheme is the smallest unit of a word that has meaning. A morph is the phonetic realization of that morpheme, or in plain English, the way it is formed. An allomorph is the way or ways a morph can potentially sound.
When is the passage formed? For a large number of speakers, it can make words happy, means, root words, and effects, enough for the purpose of understanding complex words. Take the anti-systemic prevention word. It might be broken for the following. Anti means against, dis means separate, anchor means root word, to dismantle is to end the official status, especially the church, and man means indicating word is name. Therefore, from its happy numbers, it intends to oppose a divided church state, and this refers primarily to the 19th century English church. On the contrary, for most user, knowledge of affix will suffice to make words from several passages. This is what George W. Bush was looking for when he said that people misjudge him, native English speakers who knew what the president was up to, meant to understand what the former president was trying to say, even though he was inventing new words for a popular lexicon when he was wrong. Means, Pashims is also an example of the created word, which includes Pash, referring to former presidents, and ISM names the meaning of the words attached to him. Rather than stop at the root and phonics levels, some linguists take the paraphrasing feature
As author Keith Denning and his friend explain, etymologists and those interested in language history might go in opposite direction and isolate themselves as more of every voice that has a different function. So they must go as far as Proto-Indo-Europe to search for it. Both viewpoints were valid. While the criteria were clearly stated, a statement from Kate Denning, Brett Kessler, and William Leben, The English Vocabulary Element, 2nd edition, Oxford University Press, 2007.
Allomorph. Allomorph adalah istilah linguistik variasi bentuk suatu morfem karena pengaruh lingkungan yang dimasukinya. Variasi ini terjadi pada perubahan bunyi atau fonologis tanpa perubahan makna. Dalam bahasa Indonesia, contoh allomorph pada morfem ber, be, dan bel, serta me, mem, men, meng, dan men. Allomorph merupakan bentuk dari morfem yang sudah diketahui statusnya. For example, in English, a past tense morpheme is ed. It occurs several allomorphs depending on its phonological environment and simulating phrasing of the previous segment or inserting a sakwa after overall stop. Allomorph does not after stem final t, although the letter is voiceless, is then explained by ed, appearing in the environment together with the fact that environment are ordered. Likewise, the D allomorph does not appear after stem final D because the earlier clause for ed allomorph takes priority. The D allomorph does not appear after stem final voiceless phoneme because the preceding clause for the T takes priority. Irregular past tense forms such as broke or was, were, can be seen as still more specific cases since they are confined to certain lexical items, such as the verb break, which take priority over the general cases listed above. Plural allomorph. The plural morpheme for regular nouns in English is typically realized by adding n, s, or es to the end of the noun. However, the plural morpheme actually has three different allomorphs: s, z, and ez. The specific pronunciation that a plural morpheme takes on determined by the following morphological rules. In English, the negative prefix in has three allomorphs: in, dan im. The phonetic from the negative morpheme in text on determined by the following morphological rules. Thank you for the presenting by Kelompok 3.